Welcome to our epic ocean, where critical solutions to a planet in peril are brought to the surface. Our epic ocean celebrates all that is epic about the ocean and why it is the planet's most vital resource. And now to our host, Rich Gurman.
There's an old Indonesian folktale about a poor fisherman who accidentally hooked a gold wire. Excited at the perceived fortune bestowed upon him, he started to pull the wire into his boat. But his boat began to sink because of the weight. By the time he realized what was happening, it was too late. The boat sank and the fisherman disappeared. His greed killed him. Indonesia is the world's leading shark producer, catching sharks both off the coast and also moving into illegal waters and killing protected species. Worldwide, humans kill 100 million sharks annually. Almost all parts of a shark have economic value and contribute to the livelihoods of fishermen, traders, and exporters. There's a huge market not only for shark fin soup, but also for their meat and oil. My guest today is not only shining a bright spotlight on these illegal and destructive practices, but is also working tirelessly to help the fishermen responsible for the decimation of this species that plays a critical role in the overall health of the ocean ecosystem. She is doing this out of compassion, knowing these men are just trying to feed their families. She's doing this by supporting the shift from the genocide of sharks to a much healthier alternative. Shark girl Madison Stewart, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me. I
am so excited. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. As I was saying to you before we went live, I'm a dolphin and whale guy, so I have a lot to learn about sharks, so I'm excited to pick your brain over the next hour plus. So in 1975, Peter Benchley's now classic movie Jaws horrified millions of people around the world, including me. I remember watching the movie and standing in front of the toilet as like a 6 or 7-year-old boy, and I was terrified to pee, convinced that that shark was going to come right out of the toilet and get me. Now, 40 plus years later, I've paddleboarded thousands of times here off the coast of Laguna Beach, and the most common question I ever get from people is, do you see sharks or are you afraid of sharks? And my patent answer is always the same, and that is I feel safer out on the ocean than driving on the 405 freeway. So let's begin by debunking the myth, Maddie. Are sharks something to be feared?
Oh, man. Okay. Let's start with the easy question. So what I love, I love Jaws. You know, it's like one of my favorite films. I have the 3 main characters' names tattooed on my foot. So it's been a huge part of my childhood, and it totally made everybody so terrified of sharks. And you know what I love about Peter Benchley, who initially wrote the book? He actually appears in the movie. He does a little cameo as well. And he later on went to say that he was diving and he came across some sharks that had recently had their fins cut off. And he made this statement that's always stuck with me. And he said, if I had to rewrite the movie now, I could never paint the shark as the villain. So it's really amazing to see that even Peter Benchley, who wrote Jaws, turned out to think, oh my gosh, sharks have more to fear from us. And that is the truth. Are they dangerous? Absolutely. Do they kill people? Absolutely. But are they bloodthirsty, mindless killers that we need to be terrified of? No. They are just like any other predator in the environment. There are dangerous situations with sharks, but they are not crazy. They're not out for human blood, and they're not killers.
So clearly there is a lot of misunderstanding and fear when the average person thinks about sharks. Let's start with, why are they so critical to the overall ecosystem and the health of the ocean?
Well, they truly are the underdogs. I mean, they get this bad rep. Nobody loves them the way they love whales or dolphins. But despite that, they are super important, which is just crazy. So they have this role. Most sharks are apex predators. A lot of them are keystone species. They have this role where their presence in the ecosystem is the only reason that ecosystem functions. To give you an example of that, like a really tiny example is in Western Australia, we have a lot of seagrass growth, and seagrass is super important to climate change, the environment, and dugongs and turtles eat this seagrass. Now, the predation on dugongs and turtles from tiger sharks causes them to move around in their environment and not exhaust one patch of seagrass. So the tiger sharks actually help the growth of that grass. That's a small example in which the way that sharks are perceived by other animals and feared by other animals impacts the entire ecosystem. They're very important.
That's amazing. Tell us about the history of humans killing sharks and shark finning. What do we need to know?
I mean, obviously, humans and sharks have never had an excellent relationship. We can just start off by establishing that. It's always been, oh my gosh, they're scary, and, even sailors back in the day would write scary stories about them. But the time when shark harvesting, fishing, and killing became quite serious was with the economic boom of the middle class in China and the boom of the delicacy known as shark fin soup. So shark fin soup is right up there with rhino horn and elephant tusk. It's one of those things that's a status symbol. It doesn't have any flavor or nutritional benefit, but people have it in a bowl at Chinese banquets, weddings, and important functions. It's said that if you're not with a family that can have shark fin soup at the wedding, then you're not worthy of being married into, basically. So it's an important status symbol, and the boom of that in their culture really caused a massive decline in sharks, and especially in places like Indonesia, where sharks were not even target catch until like the year 2000, and then they dominated the catch. There was a huge boom in shark fishing to support this trade, and because people don't love sharks, obviously it kind of went unseen for a long time, and we've done significant damage to shark populations around the world because of this.
So it's a status symbol, meaning I can afford to buy this soup. That's pretty unbelievable. How did you first come to fall in love with sharks, and what led to this becoming your life's work at such a young age?
So when I was like 4 years old, I had this goldfish that looked like a shark. I think it was a catfish or something. And that's when my obsession started. And then when I was younger and I'd watch horror films, I'd always root for the monster. Like, I've just always liked the bad guy. And sharks were the bad guy. And I love that people were scared of them. And I love that I could be in the water with them. And I just really related to them. And it was my kind of awesome / crazy dad that got me into diving with sharks. And he raised me to realize and believe that people were scary and sharks were not. So that's always kind of been how I was raised, and I've just loved them. And it wasn't until I was about 14 years old that my love for sharks turned into fear, because it was at 14 that I first saw the actual impacts we were having on shark populations, where places on the Great Barrier Reef I dived as a kid were showing signs of overfishing and shark populations were deteriorating.
So this happened at age 14. That's extremely young to really commit to this. That's incredible. You traveled to a small island off the coast of Lombok where you spent a couple weeks with the shark fishermen of Indonesia. First off, I love your approach to this. Instead of shaming people, you really aim to get to know these people and understand them. My first question, I have a bunch on what you did there, but how did you get them to allow you to join them and document the experience?
Yeah, it's funny. So the first time I ever went to Indonesia was with a film crew. We were making this documentary, Blue the Film. And it was really, really amazing. And it was my first kind of realization of the severity of the shark fishing occurring there. Indonesia, like many other places around the world, have lower socioeconomic villages that people can exploit. So you're going to get a lot of fishermen that have no other job options that'll get paid very little money to do a lot of damage. So they are a target for people exporting shark fins, and Indonesia is a classic example of that. So I went there, documented the shark market, and then kind of left, and it never sat right with me. So went back a few years later and just tried to have a conversation with the fishermen. And at first, I wasn't getting through to any of them. And my conversation was not, hey, you need to stop fishing sharks because they're important. It was, hey, can I use your boat? Can you take me to do this instead? Can I be a tourist on your boat? And they were just so scared of me because they know that the world really looks down on them and they didn't want to be exposed for what they were doing. Mm-hmm. So eventually, after talking to one of the fishermen, I gained enough trust with them for him to take me on adventures for a week on his boat. And that's when I had this realization that this could be a viable thing. I was shocked at what I saw. The reef around where they fish sharks is amazing. There's cool waves to surf. There's beautiful beaches. So it all started with that one fisherman. And then after years of knowing them, working with them and supplying some of their income, I was able to actually join them on a fishing trip and really get a first-hand idea of what they do.
That's awesome. I saw in one of your videos, you were standing in the area where they collect the dead sharks and auction them off. And you said that in order to build the trust of the fishermen that you couldn't show any sadness. How hard was that for you and your team?
So, yeah, it's something we do in the shark market. Is I'm not allowed to act like I care about sharks because that blows our cover. So for me, it's really good because I get to act and I don't have to show sadness, and that helps me get through it, to be honest, and being kind to people and just, but for other people, when I take other people there, I see it really get to them. You know, these people are seeing sharks that they've dreamt of seeing in the wild, and they're seeing them for the first time dead on a floor, and that's very difficult. So I see them trying to act okay with it, but they're not. But in that moment, I think the most important thing is being there. And I've always said this, and it's such a strange thing because I am such an emotional human, but I've always said that one of the biggest threats to conservation is emotion. And if I went in there and got sad over all the sharks that they were killing, I wouldn't be able to get anything done. So it was a bigger picture thing for me. Yes, this is sad, this is awful, there's dead tiger sharks all around me, but if I can just hold myself through this moment, gain this trust, I could potentially stop what I'm seeing here.
I feel like it's almost a catch-22 because I'm the same way. Like my love for the dolphins and the whales and just everything related to the ocean. I've had probably 2,000 encounters right here in Laguna Beach, and every single time it's like the first time. I take people and they cry, right? And, you can relate. So I think my point is, I think you need that emotion to care that much, and it makes it definitely more challenging. What were the overall goals? What were you hoping to achieve on that 2-week journey? Why did you go fishing with them?
So the reason that I went fishing with them, there's a few reasons, but the main one for me was I didn't want to play a hero by going there and stopping them from fishing until I knew exactly what it was that they did. I needed to understand the process. I needed to understand what they went through, and I needed to understand if me offering them tourism was going to improve or deteriorate their living conditions. So I didn't want to shut something down without even having said that I have experienced it. And the other reason is because I wanted to see where they were going and how it could be utilized in tourism. So it was a very successful trip, really, despite the fact I had to spend 2 weeks on a boat with no toilet and a bunch of sharks being killed. It was a very successful trip in the sense that I learned a lot, and it really helped me get to know my fishermen better as well.
So it wasn't just, we're going to decommission this vessel. It was more about really understanding what these people are really experiencing in their day-to-day lives, yeah?
Yeah, and that was a little earlier on in my project and my work where I couldn't actually raise the money or have the amount of tourists I needed to stop them fishing all year round. So they'd work for me whenever they could, and they'd choose that over shark fishing any day. But there were still times where I couldn't muster up what I required to stop them from fishing. And I'm not going to say, hey, you can't work this month. So they had to go fishing, and my request was like, all right, can I tag along? And some of the things I learned are like the amount of money they spend on fuel and supplies just to travel a week offshore because there's no sharks locally because they've all been fished out. And it's so dangerous. They hurt themselves, they make mistakes. One of them fell overboard on a fishing trip, not the one that I was on, but one of them fell overboard and was lost at sea for 7 hours until they found him. So they go through so much. So one of their main motivations for moving into tourism with me and away from shark fishing has nothing to do with the money, but more to do with the safety.
Yeah, a lot safer to take tourists out than to go do what they were doing. And I think over the entire 2 weeks, they only harvested 12 sharks. Is this an obvious sign that overfishing is taking its toll? What did you discover in your interactions there?
It's one of many. So my shark fisherman, he says to me, my grandfather used to fish sharks like locally, and then my dad has to go here, and now I have to go here. They tell me about getting fired at by helicopters when they're in illegal waters. They tell me that they go all the way to Australian reefs just to get a catch that will make their expenses on petrol worthwhile. So the decline of sharks is noticeable through scientific research around the world, but also through communication with these fishermen and just by looking at the local Indonesian ecosystem. One sign of an unhealthy ecosystem is heaps of sea urchins, like heaps, like covering the seafloor. So that means there's no predatory fish eating them and keeping their population down because all the sharks have gone and those fish have been eaten by bigger fish that sharks would usually eat. So when you go to this beautiful island and the reef's stunning, but there's heaps of sea urchins everywhere. And it's the first indication. I always look at that and I think it's the first sign to me that, something's gone wrong here.
It's the same thing here. We have a kelp forest right off the coast, and if there's a whole bunch of sea urchins, that's a sign of an issue. So I think it's the same thing. Yeah. And like you said, so they only caught 12 sharks, and that total value wasn't even enough to cover their expenses. I mean, what did it feel like to witness the killing of this animal that you love so much? I don't think I could even stomach it. And it didn't even make sense for them financially.
So it was a really weird moment because I've never seen my fishermen unhappy. They're the most, mentally stable people. They're just family and religion orientated, and they're very Indonesians are just a hardworking people, and they'll make the best out of any situation. I've never seen them so sad than at the end of that trip, sitting around a table, all 5 of them, trying to figure out how to split 600 Australian dollars the last 2 weeks of work that's got to last them the next month. And they made about 600 Australian dollars, and they owe about 900 on their boat. So there's a percentage that has to come out to pay off their boat as well. So for me, it was a big moment because it was like, not only is this horrific, but it's almost in a way kind of good for me because I can improve this for them easily. I can't stop someone fishing sharks in Australia because there's no job I'm going to offer them that makes them more money than a hugely lucrative market in a first world country where they're getting heaps of sharks. But in Indonesia, there is a link in that trade between them and where the shark fins end up that I can infiltrate because they're being exploited, and I can use my privilege to just sneak my way in there and cut off that part of the shark fin trade, which is what I'm essentially trying to do.
Got it. And like you said, your goal is to help these young fishermen replace their income, which is not even a substantial income, with something more sustainable and obviously friendlier to the ocean. And this led to the creation of your project. Tell me about that project and what progress has been made in helping them shift from shark fishing to working with tourists.
So Project Hiu, and Hiu is the Indonesian word for shark, is based on the idea of improving life above and below. And let me just make it really clear that I am not a people person, and I am not a good person in the sense that I'm not like a humanitarian. I went in there wanting to save sharks. I didn't give a damn about people. I was like, okay, I'm going to manipulate, full honesty. I'm going to manipulate these fishermen. They're going to work for me, and I'm going to stop them from killing sharks. And now my head's been screwed up because now I love them all so much. There's kids on the island that are like my children, and now I'm like, damn it, now I have to save sharks and people. This sucks. What happened? I'm like the Grinch. Like I just grew a heart and I hate it. It's making my life so much more difficult. But the truth is they're such good people, and improving life for them means improving life for sharks. So it's a win-win, and it's amazing. And it's something that we do not see enough of in conservation. But so many issues around the world happening to sharks, we don't understand because of our level of privilege. But for most people, sharks aren't something that you can go and swim with. They're food for your kids for the next few weeks. So just understanding that was the step, and that's how Project Hiu started. And it's about bringing the opportunity of tourism into this village where they fish sharks and seeing if we can get them to transition and come work with us instead.
Beautiful. So what's the big goal with Project Hiu in terms of tourism? What does that look like?
I try not to have goals purely because I don't want to either succeed or not succeed at them. I just try and take it day by day. But I think the main objective is to have them self-sustained and operating tourism operations and utilizing their amazing marine environment that surrounds them, and just giving them the ability and the power to do that by themselves, and then having more and more fishermen jump onto that opportunity. So there are a lot of boats there, and I only have 6 that work for me. So that's a huge impact. I take 1 boat out of the water, we save 400 sharks a year. So 6 is a lot of sharks, and it feels good to be doing that. But I do want the whole village to kind of join in on it. So it's a slow process. It's getting there. We look established. I may sound like I know what I'm talking about, but the God honest truth is I'm winging it every day. So we're just trying and learning along the way. And the most important thing is knowing what we're doing and why we're doing it, and that it is actually helping sharks. So the rest is easy.
I love 2 things that you just said. One, that you don't really have goals. I interviewed Captain Paul Watson recently, and he said the same thing. I was like, what's your big goal? What's your vision? He's like, I don't have a goal. We just do what we do every single day. And then the second thing I love that you said is that you're just winging it. I think when people look at someone like you, maybe someone that's newer as an activist or whatnot, they might look up to you like you've got it all figured out and this master plan that you're, unveiling one step at a time. So it's kind of refreshing to hear that you're kind of making it up as you go.
Totally. I think people just go onto my Instagram and then they're like, wow, you're just so Like, you just know what you're doing and you're an inspiration. And I'm just like, oh, heck, I've done like a bit too good of a job here. Look, it makes it look like I know what I'm doing. Like, I do not. And most of the amazing, like, this is interesting because everything I've ever done in conservation, I have planned. I am an organization freak. Project Here was the one thing that I did not and could not plan, and it's been the most successful. I think when you're just true to your cause and you have a deep sense of self and you know what you're doing and you know that it's going to be the right thing to do, nothing else matters. So you don't need qualifications. You know, I never even finished school. You don't need to have a certain amount of experience or anything. You just need to know and believe in what you're doing.
I totally agree. And, you know, passion obviously is a part of that. And it's also staying in your lane. You know, we can't solve all the ills of the world, you know, by ourselves. So I love that you've picked your lane, which you were blessed to figure out when you were 14 years old or even younger, and you've just stuck with it. So I admire that. You mentioned earlier, and I love that part too, about how you went there to save sharks and accidentally fell in love with the humans. And I'm with you. I've always found over the years, the more time I spend, especially with the dolphins, because they're just living in this state of pure joy, it makes it actually harder for me to spend time with the two-leggeds. And so I love that you fell in love with the people. And I've been to Bali and over there, and that was the thing I took home. Just the people are just like, they don't have much, but man, they're just beautiful people, just smiling and happy, and the children. And speaking of, tell me about the fisherman who named his baby daughter Pip.
Yeah, so my nickname's Pip, or Pippy, because my dad's a pirate and my mum's a hippie. So everyone grew up calling me Pippy. And that's what they all call me in Indonesia, because sometimes they struggle to pronounce Madison. So they're like, what's your name? And I'm like, Pip. And they love it. So they're like, oh, Boss Pippy, Pippy, Pip. And one of the main fishermen that works with me, and he's really been instrumental in everything I've done, because he wants to get out of shark fishing, and he knows he's worthy of so much more than shark fishing. This man speaks 4 languages, and he's been to university. He had to drop out because his father died and he had to take care of his family, so he had to go back to shark fishing. But he is worthy of such a better life, and he has been working with me and helped me so much. And a year ago, his wife gave birth to their second baby girl, and they named her Pip. And at first I thought they were joking, but no, her name's Pip, which is just crazy. Like, I met that man 2 years earlier taking sharks off his fishing boat and dragging them to the market floor to be sold, and now he has a daughter named after me. I don't know what possible award or recognition or achievement could surpass that in life. That is like the one thing for me that was just like, I'm doing the right thing, and yeah, this is important.
I was going to say, emotional Maddie must have cried on that day. That's incredible. Yeah, you take that over an Academy Award, right?
Yeah, any day.
Any day. So I think I'm sure you'll agree, the real fight is not against the fishermen working to feed their families. It's against the world's demand for the catch, right? And I think the other goal of your trip was to raise awareness in China related to the impacts of the shark trade, aiming to get them to understand the origin of the fins that wind up in their soup. That feels like an important yet steeply uphill battle to fight. What impact have you made here, along with other people committed to this effort?
Love that you've asked this question, because it's something I get a lot. Like, you can't just focus on this, you've got to focus on the consumers as well. And it's totally right. There's so many different aspects of this trade we need to focus on. But one thing I've come to learn and been forced to acknowledge in my activism career is that I do not know everything. And that is a very difficult thing for me to accept, because if you ask anybody in my life, I do know everything. So I don't pretend to understand the Chinese culture or think that I am in a position where I can dismiss it or attempt to make them stop it. So for that side of things, my biggest strength has been partnering with other people that do understand it and helping them. And the one thing that I'm working on now is breaking this conception that shark fins are amazing, like really, what's the word I'm looking for? What's that word? It starts with G. I've had a mental block. Not glamorous. Oh, I've forgotten it.
It'll come.
I've forgotten the English language. One day in quarantine, I haven't spoken to anybody. I've forgotten it. But yeah, really like prize delicate, like delicacy, you know, like a very expensive thing. This is something emperors ate in the Ming Dynasty, so they're important. And people have this perception that these shark fins are such a valuable item, when in reality, I see them getting cut off sharks that have maggots crawling all over them. And I see them dragging these sharks up on the beach where kids are pooping. So I want to break the misconception that this, in fact, is not a very important, amazing piece of shark fin. It's actually just come from a really horrific place. The shark meat attached to it is rotten. Like, this is not a glamorous meal. So that's something I want to help do through the images and the videos that I take. But going up to Chinese people and just being like, hey, you got to stop this, that's not something I can do. Talking to Indonesians, like, I'm Australian. We have a little bit of a bond. We have a little bit of an understanding. You know, there's ways that I could talk to them. There's things that I could relate to them about. Their boats used to fish where I grew up diving on the Great Barrier Reef. We have that connection. But I do not understand China's culture, and I'm not trying to understand it. I think that me just supporting other people that know it better is the best thing to do.
Do you think if you had like the support of someone in China, a celebrity or an activist, are there those people that exist that are working on this cause? Or is it just so deeply ingrained in their culture?
No, it's very deeply ingrained, but there has been great success with that sort of thing. And it's something that I'm aiming on doing in the future. I actually want to take people in that space and maybe even take them to Indonesia to see this stuff firsthand. But there have been other people, for example, Wild Aid, who did a campaign with famous Chinese actors and a basketball player, and they had amazing success raising awareness around shark fin soup. So the one part where I see myself being able to have an impact is knowing exactly what comes from Indonesia and making its origin transparent to them. But with everything else, there are already amazing people doing that kind of stuff. And I like what you said about staying in your lane. And it's something that it took me years to learn as well, is actually just being humble and realizing that you're not good at everything. And if there's someone else doing it, you should probably just help them instead of trying to do it on yourself. And it's something, unfortunately, you see way too much of in conservation, is people trying to one-up each other. I can do a better job riding this shark fin bill than you can. When it's like, actually help them, support them if they're already doing it. Don't try replicate it.
I love that you said that. Well, I have my main business that I've had for many years now is completely based on collaboration. And when I moved into the nonprofit world, into the conservation world, I wanted to take everything that I know about online marketing and collaboration and working together and really bring it into that world, because I was seeing exactly what you're saying. A lot of ego, a lot of, like you said, I could do it better than you. And it's like, why would you create something that someone else already is working on? Like, if we're going to solve the ills of the world, there's only one way we're going to do it, right? We got to do it together. So I'm really glad that came up. And speaking of other conservationists, I love your approach of working directly with these fishermen. Some people would consider them the problem, but to me, this idea of, I call it sleeping with the enemy, is so powerful, as you proved. Did you get any backlash from other conservationists or from the public?
Oh, mate, I am the queen of getting backlash.
The queen of backlash.
It's my number one thing, it seems. I got like a little target on my head. Yeah. Several times, lots of conservationists, lots of people, heaps of people I've never even met. There's been people trying to take credit for the project that had nothing to do with it. There's been all sorts of like crazy stuff happen. The backlash I always find super interesting, not even with this, but with other fishermen that I've worked with, I've gotten it as well. And it's been interesting because I always end up having more of an impact than those people ever have. So it's like, my favorite quote is, you will never be criticized by someone doing more than you. And that's the reality. And you know what? I've had people calmly approach me and say, hey, you're doing this incorrectly. And I've been like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. But when people just attack you, you have to assume that that's not coming from a good or legitimate place. So I think a lot of it is just, you know, the typical ego and jealousy and stuff. But yeah, you get a lot of crap when you do stuff like this. And there's people who are like, you know, all you're doing is helping some shark fishermen have clean water for their kid and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, maybe, you know, maybe my whole project's going to fall apart and they'll just raise the price they paid them for shark fins. Maybe that'll happen. At the end of the day, that's a win. made it a little bit harder for them to go get shark fins, and at least I'm trying something. Trial and error. Nobody's perfect, and that's what we all need to be doing. And if your heart's in it, keep your head down, focus on you, and don't listen to what everybody's saying.
Okay, but based on what you said before, and like I said, I'm like you, I'm sensitive. So anytime I catch shit from people, as much as I want to be like you just said, like maybe they're jealous, it's their ego or whatever it might be, or maybe they have a legitimate point. In any case, like, it affects me. I just the way I am. And you admitted you're emotional too. So being totally honest, like, how hard is that when you get that backlash, especially if it's, or actually break it down both ways. From the general public, maybe you're like, these are just, trolls on the internet, who cares? And then the people that are also working in our space, like, how do you deal with it?
From people I respect, yeah, totally. Sometimes I don't deal with it. I've got a plethora of mental health issues that I deal with on a daily basis that are exacerbated by that kind of communication from people. It's very difficult. I never wanted to be in the public eye, especially not in conservation. It's actually better for me to be completely anonymous, because then I can sneak into places and get away with things. But it's also been super helpful. And you know what? There is that thing where, like, I'll have 100 people say something amazing to me and one person say something negative. And sometimes you focus on that negative one.
All
and
you hear, yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So yeah, I'm guilty of it. I definitely get affected by it. I have a few key coping strategies. My friendship circle is really good at that kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, it's just all about when I'm actually there doing the work and seeing the change, then none of those comments seem to matter.
That's good. That's good. I think, thank you for acknowledging, having some what you call mental health issues. I think that's really vulnerable of you, and I appreciate that. And I think what you said about having a circle of friends that get it and get you is so critical. I've always had that also, and it's like, I always tell my friends, like, hey, if you ever see my ego getting out of control, please come whack me in the head with a baseball bat. Like, I just always want to be the same dude that you hang out with on the beach. We got to keep our egos in check for sure. You mentioned that you never wanted to be in the public eye. Did you get to the point where you're like, wait a minute, if I'm going to really raise awareness and make a difference, I need to put myself out there. I need to create this content and show people?
It wasn't quite that graceful. So I had a far less noble reason. So when I was younger, my first ever documentary that I was in was called Shark Girl. And it's kind of what kickstarted my career in the eye. And when they first approached me, this production company, and they were like, we want to make a documentary on you. What you're doing is amazing. You're helping sharks, and we want to, do this. I literally wrote back an email. I was like 18 at the time, and I was like, no, thank you. I know what the media does to sharks. Like a really arrogant email where I was like, no, you're just going to make it look like Jaws again. So then they wrote back and they were like, okay, well, these are some of the ideas we had, and we want to shoot in places like Palau, the Great Barrier Reef, the Bahamas, and all your travel would be paid.
Let's go.
So, it wasn't my head being like, okay, I got to do this to save sharks. It was my head being like, free trip, let's go. That's all it was. It was not a good, noble reason. So this is a big expose, this podcast.
I know, right?
Yeah, so that's what really skyrocketed me into it, and then it just spiraled from there, and it kept becoming. But you know what? Like, it's so amazing because very little of what I do would happen if people weren't observing it and supporting it. So I really appreciate the amount of following and the amount of productions that I work with, and film has become my way of telling the story. So it is important.
100%. And we'll talk more about film in a little while. You mentioned earlier that you surf waves. I think I saw in one of your films that you surf waves in Indo that no foreigner has ever surfed before. Is that true? Is that true? And how cool was that?
Yeah. There's this amazing tiny little point break off the island, and the kids surf it with these boards that are like chopped in half, and yeah, the fishermen just know spots that are local to them, and people don't go to these places because, like, I was told, you can't go to Fisherman Island, they'll cut your throat. That's what I was told. And this is like, now it's like, I rock up there, I'm walking through the village, no one speaks English, people are shouting my name, pulling me into their house to make me coffee, playing with soccer with their kids. I've got a shark mural painted in the school, so don't take people's advice. That's all I can say. And yeah, there's a little wave off the island there that we like to surf, and it's not accessible by other people. And because it is a Muslim culture, I always wear like a wetsuit and long sleeves, which is usually such a hassle because it just feels like you're being waterboarded when you're paddling in the water, but it's so fun. And then the kids join in, and there's amazing little spots like that I would never have found if I had listened to everybody's opinions on shark fishermen.
Wow, that's so cool. A wetsuit. The water is like 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Wetsuit must be rough.
Yeah.
So speaking of surfing, you created an Australian guide to surfing with sharks. It sounds like you felt your country was missing the mark when it comes to educating people on the apex predator of the ocean. In it, you wrote, "I hope this," the guide, "shed some light on the seemingly endless darkness inspired by the Australian media towards the true risk of a shark attack." If I read between the lines, I interpret this as sharks are dangerous, so it's okay to kill them. In reality, there's just under one fatality from shark attacks per year in your country. Is my analysis correct? And what are you hoping to accomplish with the guide?
Yeah, so that is the average, but there are increasingly more encounters and attacks in Australia, and the darkness I refer to from the media is not only the fear that they continue to create, playing off what Jaws did, but making money out of portraying sharks as scary monsters, but also the fact that they lack the ability or the desire to educate the general public on what they can actually do to be safe around sharks. So I don't think many shark conservationists will be as open as I am about this. Sharks, especially in Australia, speaking on behalf of Australia, when you're surfing around sharks, it is incredibly dangerous. We have very dangerous areas of coastline in Australia. We have aggregations of bait fish. We have murky waters. We have riverways. We have whales that migrate up and down the coast, and all of these things cause sharks to be present and to hunt, and people surf in those areas. And they surf isolated areas too. So the dangers there are real. And one of the hardest yet most important things I had to do as a conservationist is try and use what I had to protect people by actually acknowledging that sharks are dangerous and trying to get people to take the responsibility into their own hands. So the surf guide is not about why sharks are awesome. It's about why sharks are going to mess you up if you're surfing at the wrong time. And it's stuff that we need to know. And it's been really, really interesting getting the feedback from it, because people that surf every single day, for example, out the front of a river mouth after heavy rainfall in murky water, which is one of the worst things you can do, are messaging me being like, I had no idea. Like there's bull sharks here. And I was like, yeah, of course. And it's more dangerous at these times of days and this weather and this, and this. So by actually acknowledging that sharks are dangerous, not only are we saving people's lives, but we're saving sharks, because every time there's a shark attack in Australia, we respond badly and we want to go kill sharks. So it's another one of those, just like Project Here, going around and saving people to save sharks.
In the conclusion of the guide, you wrote, "Know your place in the ocean and accept that risk and your own personal attempts to make it safer for yourself, and never forget it's not our ocean." To me, this screams of what we were talking about, the egocentric, selfish, oftentimes ignorant approach that humans have taken when it comes to protecting, more like destroying the planet, and the shift needed to a more eco-centric one. What point were you trying to make here?
It's not our ocean. When you go surfing, you accept the risk. You accept it. Just like when like, look how many people get killed by cars. The Australian death toll from cars is insane. And we didn't take cars off the road. We added seatbelts. So you're not going to stop surfing. You just need a seatbelt. You need to take that into your own hand. And it's just the fact that humans somehow think that our comfort or our feeling of safety surpasses the right of this animal to live. And that's just not the case. We just live in such an egocentrical society where we think we can control or have the right to control nature for our own comfort. And not only will we never be successful in doing that, but the attempt to do that, if we remove these sharks because we're scared when we go surfing, then we're also affecting the fisheries surrounding Australia, the commercial fisheries that make money off the animals that they control. We're affecting tourism. We're affecting our wildlife. And it just doesn't make sense that we think we can have that say, especially when all the information in my surfing guide is available to people. So we don't bother learning about sharks, then we get attacked by sharks and then we blame them. Like, that just doesn't make sense.
That's how humans are, unfortunately. How do you distribute the guide? We'll definitely share a link to it, but how are people getting it? And yeah, what's your plan with it?
It's available free on the website to download. I've got pamphlets that I put into like anything that we send out and leave at a bunch of surf shops as well. And it's something that I take into schools, which I find the most effective because kids are the most receptive to this information. Most adults are probably not so receptive to it, and I love them. They're my favorite breed of humans. Hot surfers, that's like my favorite type of human. They're like my number one favorite human, trust me. But they don't like to read. So getting it to your average like hottie blonde-haired male surfer is like a challenge. But, I just go down to the beach every day and talk to them and just try and like...
Once again, your real motivation is shining through, Pip. Now it all makes sense.
Throwing myself under the bus here. Yeah, no, I think the podcast I haven't recorded it yet, but I'm going to record the podcast of it and just try and get that information out there in a way that people not only realize that it's there, but realize that it's their responsibility to learn it and that it could actually help them.
You didn't know this was going to become a therapy session, did you, today? So what's your real motivation? Now we know it's hot blonde surfers. I kind of like hot blonde surfers also, but the female kind. Shark tourism, I digress. What part does shark tourism add to the problem of potential shark attacks? Are we agitating these sharks? Are we bringing them closer to shore?
Shark tourism is a huge thing. It's definitely been a major help to sharks, and it can be bad sometimes. There are people that do it incorrectly. There are people that do it irresponsibly. But the link between shark tourism and shark attacks on humans is unproven, and also it would be far worse with commercial fishing. You think that we've got operations running where people are chumming sharks and swimming with sharks, but you don't think about the fact we have fishing boats coming in and out of areas where people swim daily on a mass scale. Nothing compares to tourism when you look at that.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. So I've swam with dolphins and whales many times, but not sharks. Well, whale sharks once in Hawaii. What's the best way to swim with sharks? How do you create a closer relationship with your underwater family?
Go with someone that is responsible. There's some good operations out there, depending on where you live. It's not easy to get in the water with sharks. Sometimes you got to travel a little bit, but it can be done. People do it on the hundreds daily around the world. And it's really important because, like with anything in the ocean, after you've been in the water with it and you kind of pick up on its presence and its energy, you are better trained to handle it when you encounter it the next time you're in the wild. And it's really, really interesting to see how people's perception of sharks change once they're in the water with them as well. And that confidence could really help you the next time that you're surfing or paddleboarding or whatever. So it's important to not only sleep with your enemy, but meet them, just to get a sense of what they're like.
Take them to lunch. I'll never forget it was the very first time I went to the big island of Hawaii to swim with dolphins. And I do that at least once a year now. And we're on this little boat. Normally we just swim from the shore, but we were on a boat and we looked down and there was literally rows and rows of hammerhead sharks. And the captain opens up the back gate and said, "The pool's open." And I looked at my friends who live there, and they start putting on their equipment as quickly as possible. I was like, "Are you guys kidding right now?" And they were like, "Nope." They're like, "Rich, we're not going to put you in a dangerous situation." And so I started putting on my flippers, and as soon as I went to jump in, they were gone like they were never there. And I remember feeling this huge sense of relief. I was like, "Oh, thank God." But now, having this conversation and looking back, I wish, to your point, I wish we got in the water with them, right?
You got to sneak up on them. Hammerheads especially. Hammerheads are so timid. They're ridiculous. You really got to sneak up on them. But yeah, isn't that funny? Your first reaction is, "Oh my gosh, like, you guys get in the water. That's crazy." And then you get in the water and you realize the sharks are more scared of you than you are of them.
Mm. So let's talk about products. Most people aren't aware of the everyday products that have sharks in them. Can you enlighten us there?
Yeah, so it's not just Australia, it's a lot in the US as well. Shark meat is a huge thing that we overlook, but there's so much more than that. There is shark present in medicine, It's marketed, shark cartilage, so crushed up shark bones are marketed as a joint pain relief and even a cancer cure supplement. And neither of those things are true, and they actually contain a lot of toxins in them that are quite bad for you. They're put into pet food. We actually found mako shark in pet food that we bought in Florida at your average supermarket. Publix in Florida sells shark meat everywhere. There's shark liver oil in cosmetics, in like hair treatments. It is used very commonly, and it's happening around the world where we're harvesting endangered species of sharks to be able to supply these products with these things. So one of the best things that you can do to help sharks is just make sure that you're not contributing to them being killed by buying any of these products. And there's plenty of places where you can go to find out what the products are. Like, I have a section on my website that gives you a little more information, and you'd just be shocked at how many places actually have them, sell them, and market them. And this is the equivalent. Like, imagine going into your Publix and seeing like crushed rhino horn tablets. Like, it's really no different. There are populations of sharks in our ocean that have declined up to 97%, and those very same species are being crushed up and put into supplements for Americans and Australians to use.
You're reminding me of my days in Florida. I lived in Florida most of my life, and Publix was my grocery store. And to your point, if somebody walked into a Publix and saw something that had rhino horn or elephant tusk in it, they'd probably be like, "What? Why would they wouldn't buy it?" It's just so bizarre to me that we would put sharks in these things. And to your point, they have no value. It's just crazy.
No value at all. I mean, you know, it would be a lot harder for me if sharks were really good for you to eat. I'd be like, okay, look, it's great, it tastes great, but please stop.
Good. Yeah.
But I can safely say it doesn't taste good. I know, because I ate it as a kid, because that's just normal in Australia. I really hope karma doesn't come back to bite me in the ass one day because of that one. And it's not good for you. It contains toxins. These are apex predators. They live for a long time. They get big. They've got mercury. They've got all sorts of really bad stuff in them that we then consume when we consume them. And there is absolutely no evidence that any of this stuff actually works. And there are plant-based alternatives to everything that sharks are being marketed for as well, which is the most important thing.
100%. So at the beginning, I mentioned Jaws. I was a little surprised at your response to me bringing that up, because I was going to ask you, I wonder if Steven Spielberg realizes the negative impact that his film made, creating so much fear around sharks. I remember Rick O'Barry made a public apology about his work in Flipper. Do you think Steven Spielberg should do the same?
Yeah, it's funny. Everybody's like super surprised about how I feel about Jaws. Yeah. I'm definitely the worst conservationist out there.
That's going to be on this podcast. We're going to put that under your name.
The
worst conservationists out there. They'll probably get a lot of attention, actually.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. I'll live with it. I've been called worse things. So I definitely think that he should. And you know what? It's interesting. So I don't know if you've seen the movie Sharkwater, but he was actually lined up to work on that movie with Rob, and he pulled out last minute. So there's obviously some regret there from him, but at the same time, you know, that's Hollywood. And then the two Australians that are involved in making Jaws and actually shot some of the great white sequences in the film, Ron and Valerie Taylor. I've worked quite closely with Valerie Taylor. And does she regret contributing to Jaws? No, she doesn't. But she says, I wish people didn't take it so seriously. She says, I had no idea at the time that it would do so much damage. But it also allowed her, in her mind, to go out there and educate so many people because of the publicity from the film, which she has done. So none of them at the time knew that it would have this impact. And Peter Benchley seems to be the only one that was like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, what have I done? You know, and really, really taken it back. But I personally think that Jaws is an inspiration for conservationists now. Because if a film can have that much of an impact on our population and the way that people see sharks, why can't a film do the opposite? And that's essentially what Sharkwater did.
That's I like that. That's an optimistic way to look at it for sure. I'm curious if you know Ocean Ramsey, and if you've worked with her. Like you, she's doing a great job befriending sharks and showing that they're not the demons depicted in Jaws. Do you know Ocean?
Yeah, I don't know her personally. All the people that I work with have worked with her. Do I agree with everything she does? I'll happily say absolutely not. But there needs to be that person in this industry that is doing those kind of interactions, and I think that she's a good person for that. And this is another thing about conservation, which is so interesting, and I try and tell everybody that's getting into it, is there are so many different types of it. And don't assume that this is the right one or whatever one that you're pursuing or doing. Like, there's people in science that are doing an amazing job. There's people like Ocean that are educating the masses that they're not bloodthirsty killers. There's people like me standing in literal human feces at the beach filming sharks getting dragged up the beach. So we just have very different approaches and do very different things. And it's all important.
Yeah. So for people that don't know what Ocean's doing in her interactions, maybe you can explain that and why you don't necessarily agree with it.
So the part that I don't agree with is just some of the interactions that she's had with sharks that could be considered quite damaging. And with everything that we've spoken about, like I've said, it actually is not helping sharks to portray the idea that they are harmless, or to swim with a great white and say, you know, this animal is amazing and not killing me and blah, blah, blah. Like, until you've sat down with the families that have lost someone to a great white shark attack, you can't really understand the gravity that your words have when you do something like that. And swimming with sharks is amazing. I do it. You know, I go on chummed shark dives. I love it. But it's not what I do for conservation. It's what I do for fun. And I just think it's a little bit reckless to have operations where you are chumming sharks close to people, and to have celebrities in the water with sharks where there's all sorts of things, and just kind of grabbing fins and interacting with sharks in that way and riding them is not the best thing. So, but then again, it's really amazing to be involved in the conservation industry, disagree with people, but still that's not your focus. Like, I'll never put a huge amount of time and energy into being like, this is wrong and this is why. Sometimes it's just, and this is like the best advice I can say for anybody that's in conservation, someone's doing something that you don't like and you don't agree with, it's going to drive you nuts, but literally put it to the side and focus on what you're doing. Be careful where you put your energy.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I think to your point also, even if you don't agree 100%, she's definitely raising a lot of awareness, which is the first step.
Yeah, totally.
And speaking of awareness, we were talking about filmmaking earlier. You and your team produce really high quality, compelling, and educational videos. How important is using film and storytelling, especially, like you said, there's definitely a part of you that wishes you were just completely under the radar. How important is using film and storytelling to get your message across?
I'd like to answer that question with a question. How did you even find out about what I do?
Well, we have a mutual friend, at least someone that my friend Roddy told me about you many years ago. He's a high conscious filmmaker. So that was my first introduction to you, and I'm sure I watched the video.
Yeah. So I honestly feel like nobody would really understand or appreciate what I did. And it's hard to grab people's attention these days. Yeah. And I've been told several times that you're the only person actually posting really bad stuff. And it's kind of true. There's a few other people doing it, of course, but I really focus on posting graphic stuff and documenting graphic stuff. And I get attacked for it, and I get, you know, all sorts of weird responses from it. But the best response I get is to raise that level of awareness. And it's always so essential to go out and do amazing things for sharks. And then to document it, though, is how I connect with the everyday viewer and everyday person, because there's only so much I can do, and then the rest I need help. I need your help. I need people to understand. I need people to be aware. I need people to not just, you know, like, not just donate to my nonprofit, although that's great if you want to do that, but to also, you know, be careful what you're eating, what you're doing. Understand that the next time you see an Indonesian shark fisherman on TV, you know, don't yell at them for trying to feed their families, but like, know the story behind it. So it is such an important tool for me. And another thing that I really love about film, it's just my passion, I love telling the stories, but is that you asked me several times how I cope with things, and how I coped with being on that boat for 2 weeks is because I don't think I looked at a dead shark once if it wasn't through a camera lens. And it is a method of coping.
Well said. Oh, wow. So what else do you feel is important and let me back up, actually. You said you need my help. That's why I created this podcast, to help get your word out there. Like, I don't consider myself an expert. I'm just a guy that loves the ocean, loves the dolphins and whales, and wants to do whatever he can to help protect them. And if we help protect the human species at the same time, even better. So I just want you to know we will do whatever we can to spread your message, because I totally believe in it. And now that I get to know you, I like you a lot as a human being also, which is great. So what else do you feel is important for our audience to know about sharks and shark fisheries?
Yeah, so I feel like the most important thing for me, this is so funny, the most important thing for me to be able to do on this podcast is just to deteriorate my character. So I am a high school dropout. I'm homeless now. I don't have a job. I have, I like reading scientific papers. Usually I got no idea what they mean. I do not have qualifications that make me capable of doing what I'm doing. I definitely had a bit of a privileged childhood where I got to swim with sharks, but what I do is I don't ever want to be put on a pedestal. This is something that anyone is capable of. I have been fighting for sharks since I was 14 because I noticed that they were disappearing from my favorite place to dive in the Great Barrier Reef, and I was pissed and I did something about it. And I want everybody listening to know that their ability to have a huge impact on whatever they're passionate about, don't ever underestimate that ability, and don't look at people like me and think that that kind of impact is out of reach, because it's not. In no means am I professional, in no means am I qualified. Just like you said, I'm just trying to help. So there's so many different ways that you can take whatever you want to do and really do that. If you're unable to do that and you just want to support, the biggest things that you can do to help sharks is watch the products that you're consuming, support people like myself doing that sort of thing, raise awareness, put pressure on your local government to better protect sharks, and just follow stuff that I'm doing, because I will eventually need your help. There are so many people that have come on my trips, and people can join trips. Once COVID's over, people can join on trips with me in Indonesia. And since then, they have helped me with the most amazing things. I've had lawyers set up nonprofits for me. I've had people help me write grants. I've had people just step in and do such random things, but it's all a huge help. It takes a community to save sharks, not just an individual. I can't stress that enough. So if you want to get involved and you want to help, the power is there to do so. Or if you want to have an impact on the cause that you care about, your power is there to do so as well.
Well, that being said, can I come with you, and will you take me to swim with sharks?
Absolutely. If you don't scare them off like you did last time.
Now you know my story. Yeah, I totally. I took all my energy and I was just like, swim away, hammerhead, swim away. I was very powerful in that moment.
They smelt the dolphin on you. That's why.
That's
like,
right.
This guy's a dolphin lover. Get out.
I've said that for years, because everyone, like I said at the beginning, everyone, they always ask me if I'm afraid of sharks, and I always say the dolphins protect me from the sharks, and I actually believe that.
I'll be completely honest with you now, and you're allowed to say whatever you want to this, but I am terrified of dolphins.
What?
Yeah, they scare the heck out of me. I think I've been in the water with them like twice. The last time was on Big Island, and this baby dolphin swam up to me, and I just immediately thought, oh, the mum's going to kill me. The mum's going to kill me. I'm so, sharks are dumb. They're predictable. You can read a shark, but dolphins are so smart, so fast. They actually really intimidate me. So I'll take you swimming with sharks if you take me swimming with dolphins.
It sounds like we have a deal, and I'm all for it. That's awesome. That actually is a huge statement, because I would think people think you must be fearless to get in the water with sharks, but you're afraid of a little baby dolphin who wouldn't harm a flea. That is really interesting to know.
Oh, mate, I'm scared of everything. I'm definitely not brave. I've been swimming with sharks since I was a kid. I know them, I understand them, I love them, but I still switch my lights off and sprint to my bed so the monster under my bed can't grab my foot. I'm not brave. Let's just get that real. This podcast has been the worst expose of my personality ever.
This is the best. I'm loving this. So now that the world is opening back up, what's next for you? You're actually in Jakarta right now. What's on the agenda there?
I am in Jakarta. I'm in a 5-day quarantine before I'm let out. It's been a year since I have been in Indonesia, so I'm heading back to my village to see my shark fishermen. And one of the things that I will be focusing on this time around is really preparing them for when trips can open back up so that they are able to have an income again. It's been an interesting time because COVID has disrupted the tourism as much as it has the shark fishing. So we've been trying to support them the best we can during this time. But now as the world's opening back up, it's back to work. Let's make this. And, a lot's happened in the last year that's really helped me get ready for this. But we are ready to really make this happen and make this work. And I think, I have no idea what's going to happen next. I could end up in LA, which terrifies me because now I got to go swim with dolphins. But I am just going to keep going, and I really hope that I get to see some sharks at the end of this and get in the water with sharks. But I'm back in Indonesia to keep this project going, thanks to the support of everybody that's helped me get back here.
I'm envisioning a big party for Pip coming in your very near future also, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly have no idea. Watch my socials because I'll post about it, but I got no idea what's going to happen when I get back. I'm pretty excited.
That's so awesome. So you're going to hate my next question, but you've hated the last 20, so no big deal. You're still very young. You wouldn't probably say this, but other people would say that you've accomplished a lot with your work. How satisfied are you with your achievements, and what's next for you? Like, in a perfect world, what impact would you like to make? Or better said, knowing you better now, what would you like to see happen, let's say in the next 10, 20 years related to sharks and just everything shark related?
Thank you for that question. The other day, I went to get a frothy, which is Australian for drink a beer, and they didn't ask for my ID. And it was probably one of the most sad days.
Horrifying.
So thank you for saying I'm
You're
young.
still young? Okay, good.
I'm 27 years old. I'm 28 this year. Kind of scary. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with what I've done. And to be entirely honest with you, one of the biggest roadblocks in everything that I'm doing was when we lost the creator of Sharkwater, Rob Stewart. And when he tragically died, it really affected so much happening for sharks, because he's like, the lead that we were all looking up to. He was the person that we needed. He was the shark savior. So it really made me just think, oh my gosh, what now? So there's some pretty big shoes to fill, and there's a lot of people filling his shoes. But one thing that I always appreciated about Rob was just him focusing on his work and knew what he wanted to do and didn't focus on what anyone else did. And I love that about him. And I think more people need to do that. And I want to do that. That's what I want to see happen in the next few years, is continue the work he was doing in the sense of making it amazing films that people can watch. I want to see legislation changes happen. I want to see I know things will get worse before they get better, but I want to see the general public become more aware and become more involved in activism. I want to see activism normalized. I want to see this taught at schools. I want to see the youth step up to the challenge of preparing for all the mistakes our generation's making now. I want to see this village where I'm working completely transition into tourism and the shark fin buyers coming there to buy shark fins and nothing being on the floor. That's what I want to see. And it is the kind of thing where you just have to take it day by day. And that's the weird thing about conservation and activism, is society does not create a stable path for us to do this stuff. We really create that path ourselves. So there's no security. There's no knowing what the future is going to hold. It's really scary and it's really difficult, but it's also really fun. And I'm just going to keep going with it and hopefully see where it goes. This is the first time I've been out of Australia in a year and a half. We were on a serious lockdown. So I'm going to be an unstoppable machine for the next few months. I'm excited to be back in it. I'm so ready to do it. I was burning out. I was really suffering, and I had that big break. So it was a bit of a blessing in disguise, and now I'm ready to go again.
Maddie, you've been awesome. There's so much wisdom in not knowing where that, all the steps that you need to take, but it's just taking that next step, taking the next step. And what I've discovered, I'm a few years older than you, as I confessed when I shared the story of me being a 6-year-old boy afraid to go to the toilet. That was a while ago. But one thing I've discovered in my still fairly short life is that when you're doing the work that you're supposed to be doing, and you figured out it for yourself when you were 14, I was in my 40s when it just hit me this is your soul's calling, man. This is what you need to do. And I pretty much got rid of everything else so I could spend the rest of my life working to protect the ocean that I love so much. And what I've discovered is when some people would call it God's work, whatever you want to call it, but when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, the universe just tends to align and to support you. And I see this happening with you, and there's no reason. I think you just keep doing what you're doing, and everything's just going to be fine. I know it, and great things are going to happen. Last question. And you kind of answered this already, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You might know her. I was recently interviewed on the 60 Seconds for Ocean podcast where young Charlotte, I think Charlotte's like 16, the host, she asked all of her guests the same exact opening question, and you're a way better person to answer it than me. And that question is, what would your advice be to a 16 to 25-year-old young woman if they say they wanted to do something to contribute to marine conservation?
That is the best question. I have so much advice. My first piece of advice is run. Do something else.
Go to school. Get a job. Get married. Get married. Marry a rich guy.
Oh, gosh. No. That is such a good question. And honestly, I'll just give it the top of my head is like, do not follow the path you think is right. Follow the one that you want to take. I grew up wanting to go to school and do marine biology. If I had done that, I would have missed so much of what I actually ended up doing. There are things that you're going to look at and you're going to think, okay, it's going to be hard for me to do this, but this is probably the best path. Like going to school might be exactly what you want to do for some people. We need scientists, we need people doing that work. But it might not be for you. Maybe you're creative. Maybe you're passionate enough that you don't need to follow that path. Maybe you're into film. Maybe you're into art. I don't know. But if it's a lot of work, it's probably not the right thing to do. And it took me so long to realize that. And like I said, Project Hear You, that idea of using compassion over hatred, that took me 10 plus years to figure that out. So it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to not know what you're doing. And as long as you just keep going and you do it for the right reasons with your heart in the right place, then you won't fail.
I love that. So we're going to share links to Project Hear, your surfing guide, all your videos, your social media, etc. Maddie, this has been an incredible conversation. We've never spoken before this, so I really appreciate your transparency, your vulnerability, your love, your passion, and I'm 100% serious about wanting, because I still have this fear of jumping in the water with sharks. So I absolutely would love to take you up on that offer, and we'll have to meet on the Big Island, and we'll go swimming with the dolphins there. They're very ferocious, but I think I'll protect you.
Absolutely.
You will be okay. So I appreciate you so much. This has been, for me, probably the funnest conversation I've had, and as you know, I've interviewed some amazing people on this podcast. So this has been incredible for me, and I want to give you the final word. What are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts are, yes, a shark person on a podcast with someone who loves whales and dolphins, and you've had fun, and that's awesome. Maybe our two species can actually be friends.
Why can't we all just get along? All right, Maddie, Pip, you are awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to being in the water with you real soon. That's our show, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.